Non-profit accounting tips. Are you already bored? I know that most people, most non-profit leaders feel that accounting, finance management, finance processes, finance systems are all very boring topics, very confusing, and also sometimes scary a little bit when we imagine that an auditor comes or a donor comes and looks at something in our financial systems and maybe doesn't approve. And then what, right? That could be a big problem for your nonprofit. And so that could make finance and thinking about finance also a little bit scary. So, in that sense, finance and accounting have a very bad name with most nonprofit leaders that I know. With this video, with my nonprofit accounting tips, I hope to help you look at nonprofit accounting differently, really very literally differently. And I hope that this will help you to find energy to show a little bit of love and care to your nonprofits accounting systems and finance processes. Because if you do, if you invest a little bit of attention and love into it, they will pay you back, I promise. And when they pay you back, it means that they will give you the data, the information, the numbers that you need when you need them in the way that you need them, right? Doesn't that sound great? Yeah, so how do we get there? My biggest tip for you is approach this starting with the end in mind, right? So think about, be in your role as maybe project manager or CEO of your nonprofit or treasurer or finance manager. Think about what you actually need to have um, from your finance systems, your accounting systems, and your finance team. So, what are things that you need to do with information that they have in those systems, processes, and in the brains of your finance team? So, what are the things that you would like to use that information for? So, for example, that could be maybe you think it's super important. I think it's super important to create reliable reports for your donors that have all the information in it, that are correct, and that are also on time. Yeah, with and not delayed because things weren't you weren't able to find everything, and so on and so forth. Maybe what you want to achieve is to have a good cash flow projection so that you don't need to lie awake at night thinking about, can we pay the bills next month? Can I pay the salaries 2 months from now? That might also be something that you really wish you would have. Maybe you would like to be confident that the next project budget that you're going to submit to a donor or going to send with a sponsor request is correct, has all the items in it at the right price levels, and so that you can be confident that if you get the money that you ask, you have indeed all the money that you need, right? And who doesn't have this experience that sometimes you send out a budget and then you get the money and it turns out that actually you made a mistake in your budget, or some of the price levels aren't realistic anymore, and then you are in big trouble because you asked for something, you got it, and now you need to say, yeah, sorry, but I made a mistake and I can't actually with this budget do all the things that I promised to do, right? That's not really what you want. Maybe the other thing that you would like to achieve is to be able to give to your supervisory board all the information that they need to understand how your nonprofit is doing, how you're performing financially, but also maybe in terms of time spent on certain things, and so on and so forth, right? And there might be other things that you would like to know or understand or be able to share quickly, correctly, that are based on your finance data that is hidden somewhere in your systems or in the brains and computers of your finance team. So I'm curious to hear from you. What are things that you would like to have that are connected to finance and administration? I'm Suzanne Bakker. I'm a nonprofit operations strategist, and I love finance, as I hope you can see. And I talk about finance and other things at the back end of your nonprofit, like HR, admin, fundraising, management, project design, and more in this channel. And if you like to read stories about those topics, then you can join my weekly newsletter. You can find the link in the description below this video to receive 2 or 3 times emails from me per week with stories about nonprofit operations and strategic thinking about those operations. So let's go back, right? So you've been thinking about what are the things that you would really like to have, be able to do, be able to share, be able to feel calm about, that are connected with numbers, with finance, with admin, with accounting, right? So now it's a time to think about, okay, if I want to feel confident about my next project budget, what is it that I need to get very concretely out of my accounting system, or that would need to be guaranteed in my finance processes, or that my finance team should be able to give to me in just a few minutes after me asking. Yeah, so let's imagine that you are preparing a project budget and you need to purchase something that you aren't really purchasing every day. Maybe building materials, maybe you need a very specialized trainer or expert for something, and you think it's possible that in one of our past projects we actually bought building materials, or we worked with an expert. I can't remember the name. I don't remember exactly when that was, and etc. But let's see in the system if we can find if we did something like this before, and if we then can find all the information about it. And so if your systems, if your accounting system and your filing system and your finance management system is set up properly and working properly, then you would be able to find an invoice by maybe a building material company, or maybe an expert, and you could then see like, hey, this is what we actually paid for this number of items at that price, and the delivery took this maybe 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe 2 months, and so on and so forth. Or we paid that expert for 2 days of work for the training, but then they needed also time to travel, and they needed time to report, and we wanted to do some follow-up calls as well. So this is the total that we paid that person. And so you would be able to find all of that in your system. And there's more, because if your system is really working well, then you would also be able to see on the invoice like who approved that invoice at the time, and to which project were those expenses allocated. So then you know which of your colleagues, which of your team members you could go to and ask for more information, maybe about the vendor. Is that a reliable person? Did they have to negotiate a lot about the price? Was the quality of what was delivered good enough? Was the training evaluated positively by the participants? Were there tips? Lessons learned, were the building materials good quality, and so on and so forth. So that could also be something that you could find out if you have that information in your system. And then there's more, because maybe it was a big order, and maybe it was so big that according to your policy you needed to do a procurement process. And so maybe your colleague who at the time was in charge of that set up a procurement process and collected maybe 3 different offers from different suppliers, and they evaluated this, and all this dossier of the procurement could still, in the ideal case, be preserved somewhere on your shared drive, and you would be able then to see like, hey, there are 2 other experts that I could also talk to see if they are maybe available, if they might be a better fit. There are other companies who could provide the same materials. So it would give you better insight into the market and the possibilities and the reasons why those suppliers were selected at a time. And from your colleague, you can then understand if they are still happy with that selection, with that choice after all, right? So that is ideal, of course, because now if you include a number for this expert or those materials in your budget, then you can be confident that this number makes sense, right? That it's realistic. Probably you'll add some inflation correction to it, but basically you know what you're talking about and you can be confident that you have everything in place in your budget, that if you get the money as per the budget, you won't end up in trouble about it, right? So that would be a great result from just having in place a procurement policy, a policy to make sure that somebody authorizes visibly the invoice so you know who was that, a process whereby somebody indicates which project was involved so that you can easily find back all the project documentation with the evaluations, for example, of the training that was provided. And of course, the system that will help you identify that you actually used such a service before, right? So that's, I think, a very neat example of how the nitty-gritty can help you actually work on a good budget that doesn't cost you a loss of sleep at night. But let's now look at another example, and let's imagine that you think, okay, I got that budget, I submitted it, we got approval, and now we need to report, but I'm really not looking forward to that because the budget, I got a little bit over enthusiastic and I created a very complex budget with a lot of budget lines and activities and sub-activities and whatnot. And I really don't know how I can keep track of everything, how I can monitor this, let alone how I can report this. And then how can I make sure that I can report on time? Because of course, if my report comes late, that is a bad point in our book with this donor for our reliability and professionalism, of course, right? So you might think like, oh, why did I create such a detailed, complicated budget? I should never have done that, but here we are, right? Don't worry, because it doesn't matter how complicated your budget is. If you have your systems in place, you can very easily create a reporting format that links to the export of your accounting system. There are ways also for some systems that you can link directly from your system to Excel, but if you're using Excel as your accounting system, or if you're using tools like QuickBooks or Exact Online or Sage or Wave or whatever, you can export data from your system and you can make it so that you link that data to your budget lines and create a very simple overview of expenses against the budget line that you can use for monitoring, and that you can also, if you make it look a little bit nice, and if it meets the donor's requirements for reporting, then you can use this also for reporting, right? And that will take a little bit of time investment at the start for each of your project budgets to set up a template or a format, whatever you want to call it, for this reporting that you will use as monitoring, maybe on a monthly basis, and reporting according to the donor's frequency. That will take a bit of time at the start, right? Because you need to create the nice looking overview of your budget. You need to find the best way to link your export to the budget lines with a formula. You need to make sure that you put in some checks, that you're sure that you're not overlooking anything. But once you've set that up and you're looking at it and you think like, nah, this doesn't look right, I think there's a mistake, maybe something wasn't classified correctly in the accounting system, I need to go back to my accounting system and change that. And then the magic is that once you've set up this format, you can make changes in your accounting system according to your internal rules for that, of course, and make a new export and put that into your reporting format. And within seconds, you have a revised overview, and you can see that now everything looks good to you, that it's as you expected, and that the mistakes have been corrected, right? So that sounds maybe too good to be true, but this is really how it can work for you. And this is something that I do all the time. Not every day, but for sure every week I create at least one of those things, a reporting format or template, or I update a report. And it really is not rocket science. It's very easy once you've set it up, and then it can work for you anytime, and you can have access to your information and get insights into how your project is doing anytime. So that's great, right? But maybe you feel like those examples, what does it actually mean, right? What are then the things that I should create so that those examples can work for me too? So let me give you a list. This is just a few items. There's probably more, but key things for you to think about are, for example, a finance policy, to set up a policy that speaks about things like procurement, that speaks about how to allocate expenses to a project visibly, correctly, in line with the budget, and so on and so forth, how to authorize invoices so that you can know who to talk to about a certain invoice, a certain cost. That could be one thing for you to create. Another thing that you could want to create, and I'm just going to check the list that I made that I'm not forgetting anything, is a good system for filing your invoices, right? So that you can find easily the things that you need to find with your procurement dossier, for example, but also an individual invoice, and so on and so forth, right? That you have a logical system that everybody who needs to access this kind of information can access and can easily find their way in. And then for this kind of system, you would also need to think about how am I going to monitor, or who's going to monitor that we're sticking to the rules for example, naming conventions or organizing certain folders, right? Somebody needs to monitor that, because otherwise things could still get messy. People might keep documents on their own laptop and not upload them to the shared drive because it takes time, and they think I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow is not good enough, of course, because then your whole goal of having access to everything when you need it isn't going to work for you. So the other thing that you could also want to set up in the beginning is a practical approach for your accounting system, right? Whether that's Excel, QuickBooks, Sage, Wave, Exact Online, whatever it is, think about how you want to set it up so that you can extract information in the easiest way for you to match it to your project budget, to have an easy way of linking the information for monitoring and reporting purposes. So that could mean that you need to think about what kind of ledgers, what kind of accounts do I need in my accounting system? What are maybe cost centers or cost units or projects or other kind of labels that I want to use in my accounting system to classify certain costs and to help me understand which cost belongs to which project and to which budget line within that project, maybe to which activity within that project, and so on and so forth, right? But another part of that practice would also be like, how do you want things to look inside your accounting system, right? I've seen sometimes systems where it just said the name of the supplier and an amount, and that's of course not going to help you with your quest for finding information, for example, for your budget. But not also, it might be hard for you to use that in a report, right? You might not understand what it was that you have been paying for and whether that was for this project or another project, this activity or another activity. So you would also need to think about how are you going to present information in your accounting system so that you already know the key things about each item without needing to go to your filing system and look at the actual invoice, right? So that could mean that you have conventions about the structure of your booking lines, like the name of the supplier, the item that you're paying for, the period, the number of items or units, the unit price, for example, maybe dates or whatever it is, foreign currency that you've been using to pay, so that you can understand if there could be a discrepancy there due to currency exchange issues, and so on and so forth, right? So that could also be something for you to set up. And finally, another thing that you could want to set up to make those two examples possible is a good approach that everybody is involved in for receiving and approving invoices, for example, so that it's clear from the invoice what you're paying for and whether it belongs to this project or that project, and including the correct authorizations, for example, right? So those are just 4 things that you could want to set up in order to get easy access to data, information, to numbers that you need to achieve your goals of being a reliable nonprofit partner to your funding partner, because you deliver good quality reports in time and you're not going over budget because you've been able to monitor everything very carefully. And of course, a professional nonprofit who knows what to ask for and presents reliable, realistic budgets also to the donor in time, for example. Yeah, so that's how I feel nonprofit accounting can get a better name, or can feel less of a burden, less of a boring and confusing thing if you look at it starting with the end in mind, and keep at all times your eyes on what it is that you're doing all those nitty-gritty things for, right? Why are you signing off on invoices? Why are you making sure that everything is filed away nicely? That is because then you'll have access to information later on that you will need to be a reliable, realistic, predictable, good partner to your funding partners, which will make it possible for you to grow your team, your operations, in service of growing your reach and your impact for the community and the cause you serve, right? So I think that that's a big enough ambition to spend a little bit of your energy and love and attention to something as boring as nonprofit accounting and finance processes. I hope you feel a little bit of my energy coming over to you. And if you need more, just let me know. Join my nonprofit support community, and I'll try to give you a bit more enthusiasm for nonprofit finance and administration. If you want to know a few of my key, very simple tips of what I do in Excel when I'm creating those reporting formats, for example, join me in my next video when we're going to be talking about that. Bye for now.